Good afternoon, Rotarians and guests. Hope everybody had a great weekend and you are as excited as I am that we will now have some Big Ten football this fall. Welcome to the Rotary Club of Toledo virtual meeting, featuring guest speaker Heather Bradley of the Center for Nonprofit Resources. We lost another great Rotarian last week. Rotarian Tom Klein passed away on September 17th. Please join me in a moment of silence for Tom Klein. And here today to deliver a reflection is past President Chuck Mann, and to lead us while we stand for the Pledge of Allegiance is Rotarian Kim Dunham.
This is called Prayer for the Beginning of Autumn, which starts tomorrow. O God of creation, you have blessed us with the changing of the seasons. As we welcome the autumn months, may the earlier setting of the sun remind us to take time to rest. May the brilliant colors of the leaves remind us of the wonders of your creation. May the steam of our breath in the cool air remind us that it is you who gave us the breath of life. May the harvest from the fields remind us of the abundance we have been given and the bounty we are to share with others. This autumn, may our prayers and support be with our national leaders, scientists, healthcare workers, and all who are instrumental in overcoming the current world health challenges. We praise you for your goodness forever and ever. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Chuck, and thank you, Kim. As we begin our meeting, I'd like to thank and acknowledge Kevin P. Mullen Consulting as our August weekly meeting sponsor. Thank you, Rotarian Kevin Mullen. Let everybody know we had 5 committee meetings last week. So really appreciate all the committees getting together. Great work, Rotarians. We all know that's how we function. Okay, our committees make recommendations to the board. Our committees vet grants. So great job. Thank you. Also, this week, tomorrow, September 22nd, is the Mesa Bike Ride. See the flyer in the spoke and in this morning's email announcement. As we continue our committee tour this week, Youth Services Committee will be our topic. And I'd like to invite Chair of the committee, Candace Harrison, to fill us in on all the great work they're doing. Candace?
Hello, President Dew, how are you? And fellow Rotarians, I'm sorry. I have a very short presentation of what Youth Services Committee is all about. And so I'm going to share my screen. Can you see the slideshow?
Yes.
Okay. So this is the Rotary of Toledo Committee Tour, and this stop is Youth Services Committee. And because we've been virtual and haven't had a chance to meet, and Erica was very new, I decided that I would share our picture so that you know who your chairs are. And in case you run into us in any other setting, you'll know who we are. And if you want to ask questions, you know who we are and what we look like when and if we ever should come back together again in person. Who we are, the Youth Services Committee, we basically on a regular basis, we meet to assess grants that are presented to Rotary on behalf of services to youth in the community. So just as a few examples of who we've served in the past, obviously Toledo Public Schools, which is where I work personally, and Erica works for the foundation. Toledo Public Schools, Toledo Museum of Art, Toledo School for the Arts, many early childhood development programs and child care centers and so forth. Anyone that is looking to serve youth in our community and has presented grants will come through our committee. What we do when the grant requests come to our department or our committee, we look at them, we assess them, we talk about them, and then we also do site visits. So with the site visits is to make sure that the organization is serving children in the way that we would like to support them. Most of the time, we want to make sure that they're local and that the needs that they have are needs that we're able to support. And also to make sure that it meets the needs of Youth Services Committee, because as you know, Rotary has multiple committees and we have had different grants be presented to us that actually should go to other committees. So that's an opportunity for that. And again, we work with various agencies across the community. Our transformational project, which is our 3-year project, long-term, where we want to really put the Rotary footprint in the community. The last year we selected universal pre-K. And at the beginning of that, what we decided to do was provide $10,000 as the community was engaging in research on how universal pre-K could be implemented in the community. And as it stands at the moment, it's on hold because there are multiple partners, and until the community is able to decide how they would like to move, we're going to continue to also stand down and hold until we know which direction we would like to go. We have also done with other organizations service projects. So pretty much we have the grants where people come to us and they actually want funding, but sometimes people just need support or they need help. And so 2 of the things that we did last year, one was a bike assembly project through the Noel Project, where they put together over 1,000 bikes and they need volunteers from the community to come and basically help assemble bikes, because it's just like an assembly line process of them putting together bikes that they give underserved children in our community at Christmas time. And we also, Glendale Philbach is a really strong partner of ours. We do a lot with them for disability services and vocational services. So we decided to do a school supply drive for them last year. And the drive was a little different. We did a drive for their teachers because we know research has shown that teachers spend anywhere from $200 to $500 out of their own pockets annually to help provide things that students need. And so we decided to do a collection for them so that when students show up and may not have what they need, a teacher has something readily accessible and they don't have to pull from their pocket. So that was one of the things that we did. And here's just a few pictures. This was our flyer just to kind of show you some of the things that we collected. And then this was us dropping it off at Glendale Philbach. And this was just what we had on the table. Rotary was really a blessing to the students and staff at Glendale Philbach. I still, get people from the building thanking us for what we've done, because you can't see it back there, but we had so many supplies. It took 2 cars and 3 people to help us get it in. And here was just the flyer in case we wanted to, consider doing that again, what the Noel Project asked for us to do. How can you help? You can join our committee, which will be meeting right after this at 1:10. And that's unfortunate because I had a mix up with how to sign in last week. So thankfully my committee was willing to join me again this week. And you can also participate in a service project. So if you, are not able to join our committee, but you still want to help with some of the things that we're working on, we'll announce that in the spoke and also through meetings like this one, what we have coming up. So just be on the lookout for that. And you can just sign up to support. Are there any questions at this time? Okay, well then that is the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Candace, for a great tour of our Youth Services Committee. And I hope this has inspired some of you to join this committee or any other committee. And now to introduce today's speaker is Rotarian Mike George.
It's my pleasure to introduce Heather Bradley, Director of the Center for Nonprofit Resources, which is housed within the Greater Toledo Community Foundation. Born and raised in Toronto, Canada, Heather discovered Nancy Drew Mysteries when she was about 7 years old and devoured the series. Eventually, Heather began putting pen to paper herself. It started with pitching a regular column in her small town newspaper, reporting on the comings and goings at her high school, and grew into a long list of published work over the decades. She is inspired when she can help others by combining helping others with her writing. Her lifelong love of figure skating, for example, led to Heather being named as one of the first fan bloggers for the U.S. Figure Skating Association. It's one book, however, that stands out the most for Heather. With her writing partner, she was invited by the American Bar Association to create a book designed to support attorneys to successfully manage their careers. They were grateful and overjoyed when U.S. Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg agreed to write the introduction for the book. Heather considers this the greatest highlight of her career and made all the more poignant with Justice Ginsburg's recent passing. As a little Nancy Drew fan, Heather could never have dreamed her path would eventually lead her to Toledo, Ohio, to share a home city with author Mildred Benson. Today, Heather is excited to share the results of an initiative generated at the Center for Nonprofit Resources. The efforts resulted in a white paper published by the Greater Toledo Community Foundation and combines her love of a good mystery, her love of writing, and the opportunity to support the community she calls home. Please join me in welcoming Heather.
Thank you, Mike. Mike and I actually share an interesting piece of legacy. We started at the foundation together about a month apart, right, Mike? And I do want to thank all of you for inviting me to come and share what we've learned about our nonprofit community. I also want to thank Keith Burwell and the Board of Trustees for their support, not only of the center, but the opportunity to explore in different areas. This is a new type of work for the center. And I will share my screen here. Okay. All right, so many of you have served on boards or are serving on boards. And part of the reason that I wanted to get this information in front of you is it can shape our experiences for the community. Many of you are also influencers in terms of investments on behalf of your organizations. And we think that this is a critical perspective to understand. So also, it didn't take too long when I got to town. I've been here for quite a while now, but and you've probably said this too, there are just too many nonprofits in our marketplace. However, no one could help me understand or answer the question, how many nonprofits are there? That's really the base of the query for the work that we set up at the center. Today, I'm going to review phase one. This was part of the white paper. We were looking for a reliable data source. We found one, and also wanted to create a methodology with a set of key indicators or metrics that we could use to measure some of this information year over year. Also included in the white paper is a phase two where we took a deep dive into a specific subsector analysis to understand what we could do in terms of measuring efforts or community investment for a particular cause. And finally, I'll wrap up with what we think is next. I'm going to jump over to our website, our lovely new website that we launched this year. When you arrive at the website, these dancing dots here, you can click on here and you can come back to this under community engagement. You'll see that we have a research section and you'll see the white paper. And this is the page that we're going to spend our time on today. So when you scroll down, you can come back and you can look at the full white paper that was published. And there are also many active links in there to video information and other tools that you can drill down. We're going to spend our time today in these infographics. So as I said, we wanted to develop a methodology that could be replicated, and we wanted these key indicators and something that was easy to digest. So we created this infographic And what we did was, let me move these. Does anybody ever find that just the button you need is where the faces from Zoom are? Okay. So the first thing you notice is that we have geographic parameters. This is Lucas, Wood, and Fulton County. Now the footprint of the center is much larger than that, but we started with this group. And you'll also notice that this is data as of 12/31/18. For that data period in the measurement, and this is a snapshot in time, you'll see that the IRS had on record at that time 3,472 active 501c organizations. Now that, of course, doesn't include all the ones that entered and exited the market by that time. You'll also see that there was a total revenue reported by these nonprofits collectively of $4.7 billion for these three counties. Contributions, of course, are a subset of revenue, $850 million, and then 156 new 501c3 nonprofits received their letter of determination, creating legitimacy from the IRS. So this is our first lesson in looking at the data, because we make things up. And different people had said, oh, it must be, there's many new churches or there's many new food pantries. When we look at the data and start to analyze it, it's across a number of different sectors. But that's a lot, 156 entering in 1 year alone. We then wanted to take a look at the ruling date patterns, and you'll see that it's a very steep slope. In fact, since January 1st, 2010, 31. Somebody getting feedback? Are we okay? All right.
Yep, go ahead.
31% of the nonprofits entered the marketplace as of January 1st, 2010. And overall, over half had entered since January 1st, 2000, causing this slope. We drilled down and we looked at the last 2 decades to see if we could glean anything from that pattern. We also looked at the classification, and just to get a general idea of what is the split around the work that each of these groups wants to do. And one thing we learned in our research is the classification is determined by the applicant. The more reliable data point is what they call the taxonomy code, which is assigned by a trained IRS expert. And they look at all the information and they put each group into a specific taxonomy group. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. 44 cities were represented in these 3 counties, with 80% in the 6 cities that you see listed there. When we broke down the 2017 revenue, of course, that's a lagging indicator in the reporting. We knew it was a lot, but we were surprised when we found out that 84% of this over 3,400 nonprofits have less than $50,000 in revenue annually or no requirement to report at all. So that was a first wow piece of data. And then in the contributions, 89% were less than 50,000 or 89 or did not report. So we gathered up a group at the main library. So thank you to the library staff. And it was a very active discussion, and we were really pleased. It was a large turnout, and there were people from nonprofits, boards, funders, government agencies, interested citizens, volunteers. So it was a nice cross section. And after they digested this information, they really had 2 big questions that had us go back and recast the data. One was, what impact do the really large nonprofits have on this data? And we would consider them, they look more like corporations. And in fact, only 2% of all the organizations by numbers fall into this group we dubbed the Uber producers. However, they generated 75% of all the revenue. So we knew we wanted to extract that data. And then we looked at what we came to call the micro nonprofits, and we defined those as the groups that are not required to report to the IRS. And they would then go on, they were extracted from the data. And here's what you'll see. We recast or adjusted the data for that group. And you can also find that infographic on our page. So the same 3 counties, same period. Now we're down to 869 organizations with revenue of $545 million and contributions of $291 million. Similar type of slope on the line of formation. And the classifications look very similar. And the geography, roughly, if you recall, was 2080, same 6 big groups, and 1783. And even when we break it down into this subset, there is still a big chunk over here, 45%, that are 50,000 or not, 50,000 or less, or do not report on revenue, and even more when we look at contributions. So that's the phase 1 part of the white paper. Now, one thing I've also learned when I share this is I probably will not be able to answer all of your specific questions because the data does exactly what we hoped it would do. It prompted more questions. It invites the community to move from an anecdotal discussion to a data-driven discussion. And there are lots of things that we could go back and deep dive into. For example, what is it? What changed that caused this rapid increase here? But that's a discussion for another day. So in phase 2, we wanted to look at a subsector. So a group that essentially the IRS has determined through the taxonomy code assignment does essentially the same thing. It's not exactly the same thing, but they're in the same family. So what we did, you'll notice it's a similar type infographic. It's the same 3 counties, the same area. We looked at animal protection and welfare. Well, why this group? One, we wanted the number 35 to be small enough that we could march through the analysis pretty quickly, but meaningful in size. So at that time, we had 35 different organizations in the 3 counties with a taxonomy code of animal protection and welfare. Collectively, they reported 4.9 million in revenue and 2.9 million in contributions. Now you'll start to notice we started adding some data elements to this analysis. So we wanted to understand of the 35, how many were required to file? And if you're not familiar, what that means is you need to file with the IRS. So if you're over 25,000 but less than 50,000, there's an online postcard. And if you're over 50,000, there's what they call a 990. If you're not familiar with that, that's the income tax form for a nonprofit. So you can already see there's 10 of the 35 that are large enough to be required to report, but 25 that are small and don't have that requirement. So that's a piece of the information here. We looked at the contributions. Of course, this would be for the 10 required to file because it's publicly available information. We also wanted to understand how dependent these groups were on donor dependence. And we introduced a calculation that used the contribution plus grants divided by total expenses. So this group, for example, at 1.00 means they rely 100% on donor contributions, whether individual, corporate, or a combination of both. And as you can imagine, there is some risk because as there are fluctuations in donor patterns due to the economy, et cetera, they may not have predictable funding for their organization. Down here at 0.26 and 0.16, these groups have more diversified revenue portfolios. And overall, we wanted to look at what's the overall, I'll use the word health, on this dimension of donor dependence. In revenue, we did the similar analysis. We went one step further for this group, and we looked at revenue less expenses. So financially, how healthy is this subsector? And 4 of the 10 of the reporting groups realized a surplus for that year that they reported. We know it's also of great interest to funders in particular. What is the total spend on a variety of areas? And dare I say it, is there duplication? That's, almost a dirty word in nonprofit land because people are immediately afraid of consolidation. But we looked at executive communication, insurance, investment management fees, accounting, legal, advertising, and we could quantify what the reported collective investment is for those areas. And then finally, we looked at the ruling date. And this is another interesting one because look at what has happened then. All of a sudden, these skyrocket. So big numbers have come in the latter part, and then we again drilled down. So why do we care about this subsector? Why are we excited about this? You'll see a couple of case studies in the white paper where we were asked by funders to conduct this for their group. So for example, the city of Toledo through the neighborhoods group asked us to conduct that analysis for them for, at that time, their current CDBG grantees. And also the Committee for the Strategic Alliance Partnership Grant asked us to conduct a similar analysis to understand the community investment in the homelessness area, homelessness services. So we'll hop back over to PowerPoint. Oh, I'm moving you guys again. So what's next? Well, we need to update the numbers. Of course, they're lagging reporting, and 2020 being what it is with COVID, we're a little behind schedule on what we had planned, but it is our intent to bring these numbers forward into 2019. Of course, a big question people are having is, what is happening to nonprofits as a result of COVID? I'll talk about that in a minute. Unfortunately, this analysis would be lagging, but we have some other things that I can share with you. There's possible subsector analyses that can be conducted. It's not our intent to do them for every subsector, but if different funders wanted something done, that's a possibility. And we're also looking at the possibility of expanding the geographic analysis because, as I said, the center serves many more counties in Northwest Ohio and 2 in Southeast Michigan. Now, as for COVID, let me, sorry. As for COVID, we don't really know what's going to happen, but from our general observations out in the field in recent months, and also I was in a national summit and there was a speaker from the Bill Gates Foundation. They summarized similar numbers to what we're experiencing here. The experts, although we won't know till farther out, is that about a third to possibly 40 or 50% of the nonprofits will not make it through this COVID period. So there is the possibility that the landscape is not going to look anything like it does now. We're already seeing and hearing some of these fall off. I'm really excited that this methodology exists because we're going to be able to do that calculation after the fact and know that that was a contributing event at that point in time. So why did I want to come and visit you today? Because I know that, as I said, many of you are active or former or will be board members. You know, it takes a lot of board members to run all these organizations. If you think of it, if each organization only had the minimum 3 legally required, that's over 10,000 board members. And as you know, in the board you sit on, there aren't any organizations or very many with just 3. So there's tens of thousands of board seats that need to be filled. And I think when we can keep our eye on some of the data and move the community conversation from anecdotal to data, I think we can all make better decisions in terms of the investment of our time, the financial investments from ourselves and our organizations, and for any of the employees that your organization may be lending out to support these organizations. So thank you for your time, and I'm happy to answer any questions if I can.
Everyone, if you have questions, go ahead and raise your hand. You can do that under the participants tab, or you can type them in the text window. Mari looks like a question, so let's go to Mari. Maybe.
Hi, can
There we
you? Yeah, thanks, Heather, for a great presentation and all that the foundation does for our area. It's been invaluable to so many of us for so long. My question is about in what areas have you seen the greatest amount of, as you called it, fall off or fallout as a result of COVID or during the times of COVID? What are the particular areas of nonprofits? Thanks.
Yeah, thanks for the question. And I'm going to confess, there's some groups we've fallen out of contact with. So I can share my observations. About roughly a third that we've seen never really stopped. So they were the essential frontline, delivering frontline services. So whether it was medical, feeding families, home security, whatever it is. The risk for that group right now, quite frankly, is potential burnout. They've had their pedal to the metal for a long time. Another third really had to wait until the governor released the orders to stand back up, and they're trying to figure it out. I think the risk for that group and I'd love to hear any other comments or insights that you might have to share, is that a lot of them, what I kept hearing them say is, well, we're just moving our fundraisers to the fall. And I don't know how many fundraisers we can support in the fall, or Giving Tuesday, or year-end appeals. Like, how many times can we go back? So unfortunately, I think a lot of the ones that are going to fall off are not a function of what they're doing. It was a function of the existing strength of leadership and the existing strength financially. Because the ones that can pivot really quickly, they're figuring it out and they are succeeding at it. But it's really, and I know that some that had reserves are drawing down heavily on the reserves, and then there's others that didn't have any reserves and they're just scrambling. And then I know you're all aware of this, the Greater Toledo Community Foundation and a number of other groups have financially stood up funds that didn't exist, and they're working at paces that they've never worked at before. I mean, I just stand in awe of the program group, the way that they're just turning things and getting that help back out into the community. And then finally, there's another third that they've just fallen off the map. I assume a lot of them have not stood back up yet. And I suspect, I mean, they were the group in my experience that were already struggling trying to get board members. They were already struggling financially and were, like so many people who start up small nonprofits, it was coming out of their pocket. So, and regrettably, a number of those individuals themselves no longer have employment. So I don't have any hard and fast rules or any hard and fast numbers, but Mary, I hope that at least answers some or part of your question.
Great. Let's move on to Richard. Richard, go ahead with your question.
Okay.
Richard.
Hey, Heather, how are you?
Good to see you.
Yeah, nice to see you. Heather's doing just a wonderful job at the center. There's so many things that she's involved in. It's amazing. But you touched on the aspect of there's been this huge influx since really 2000 of these not-for-profits. And then also we have roughly 3,600 just in Northwest Ohio now. So two thoughts, or two kind of questions. Of the, and it was in your numbers, but you went through it pretty quickly. Of that 3,600 or 3,400, how many are rock solid and are going to clearly survive this and are delivering essential services in the community, and you know, and their funding from donors is relatively low, because you indicated those that were higher were more vulnerable, but roughly how many of those exist? And then if you could just touch on why the huge growth in 501c3 since 2000, in your estimation, what's going on there?
Thanks. Both important questions. And I did have a caveat at the start saying I'm not sure I can answer all of your questions, but I'll give it a try here. Which one do I want to start with? Let me start with the second one first. It is actually an anomaly, and the data shows this in terms of Northwest Ohio about the number. My personal theory is, and this is why I live here, we're a loving, giving, caring community, and we all like to help people. And some of us are under the misguided impression that the way to do that is to start another nonprofit. So in recent years, I think it has been made easier because the IRS used to have a much more rigorous process around their form called the 1023. They came under heavy criticism because there were backlogs. They did due diligence and they vetted, and they decided, I forget what year it was, but they decided to introduce the 1023 EZ, which, oh, by the way, I would still have an attorney help me with a couple of questions. I mean, it's not a snap either. It's still fairly lengthy and complex, but they also, as near as we can tell, aren't as rigorous in their vetting of whether it's a nonprofit or not profit worthy. So that contributed. And I don't know if there's any attorneys on the call, but there was also a move to move a lot of political support groups into the 501c3 category. And I think that drove some of it. So I don't think it's any one thing from what I can tell from my seat. It's a combination of things, but Keith and I have talked about this for a number of months now about some type of like PSA type of like some education or something, because even through COVID, I was still getting requests to assist with the startups for nonprofits.
Is that
Now-
is that happening in other cities? Same way?
Not that we can tell. So part of the white paper analysis was to look exactly at that aspect. And there was a consultant who had set up a methodology to look at the number of people per nonprofit. And so we applied that methodology, and we were way higher than Cincinnati, Columbus, and Cleveland. We thought, well, maybe it's an Ohio thing. And then we looked at Indiana, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, and it was still way higher. And then this consultant had done a forced ranking, highest to lowest, and we were between the 50th state and DC. So there's something unique, at least the data seems to indicate, there's something unique happening in this particular region in the creation of nonprofits. Now to your first question, did that answer? I mean, I don't have a full, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So to the first question, I don't know the answer. However, what we have been seeing pre-COVID was an increased pressure, particularly from funders who rewarded collaboration. So the groups that are now actively seeking ways to collaborate, not necessarily merge, but are there more effective, efficient ways to get the work done, to better serve the community? Those are the groups that are going to survive. Like the big Uber producers, I can't imagine they're going anywhere. They have pretty reliable income streams. And you may start to see some mergers. We are starting to hear some groups that are expressing interest. They know the writing's on the wall. If they don't do something, then they are not going to be here. That's the bald reality. And in all of those cases, it's directly incumbent on the board understanding that they have to develop and support a strategy to ride through this. Now, if the money's not there, the money's not there. But for those that could at least eke by through this era, I'll call it, I don't know obviously how long it's going to last. So I fear that's not a satisfactory answer. We don't have numbers, but you look at the 865, if we use even the estimate that's provided by the Bill Gates Foundation, 30 to 50% of them aren't going to be here. And then how do we serve all the people they've been serving?
Yeah,
Great.
thank you.
Okay, so let's go to Jim Slattery for our next question. Jim, go ahead and unmute, Jim. There you go.
Well, thank you, Heather. It's fascinating, and it's kind of interesting that there hasn't been a lot of accumulation of data already, but you've done a great job of doing that. So it's my impression that the part of the Community Foundation's mission was to create efficiencies among the nonprofits, to bring them together and help them to eliminate some of the duplication and waste that's out there. But as I look at how many nonprofits there are, it would seem like that job is bigger than ever. What is the Community Foundation doing to actually bring these folks together where we don't have so many duplicated potential nonprofits?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a great question. And Keith, if Keith's on the call, I'm happy to have him jump in too. But first of all, the first big thing is the investment in the center itself. So if it wasn't for the Greater Toledo Community Foundation, the center wouldn't exist. And what we do things like professional development, I'll come back to that in a second, technical assistance, one-on-one consulting specific to an organization, on-demand resources. We have hundreds and hundreds of no-cost on-demand resources on the website, and engagement. So to your point specifically, Jim, one, in the engagement, it's, should we convene different groups? How do we facilitate those types of questions? And on the professional development, and a lot of it is around the strategy and the skills at various roles, the Greater Toledo Community Foundation has underwritten all of the registration fees for the remaining workshops for the rest of the year, and people are taking advantage of that. So one is literal baseline capacity building. Now, I'm going to digress for a second. Heather Bradley's opinion, and this is all this is Heather Bradley's opinion, is with those numbers of board seats and organizations, there's only a finite number of really great board chairs, really great EDs, really great volunteers, really great staff members, and dollars. So I think part of what we need to do, and we have talked about it, but it's a heavier lift, is really bringing some of the boards up to speed. We've got some things going in the background for that, because mostly the center is in relationship with the staff. Now, the other side of the house, which is financial investment, and so the center doesn't give away any money, but I am the grant officer for one grant, and it's the Strategic Alliance Partnership Grant. So the investors for that grant are the Greater Toledo Community Foundation, the Stranahan Foundation, and ProMedica. And they offer 2 grant rounds, and that is specific investment for groups that want to come together to better leverage human and financial resources. So those are just some of the examples. Like there's more on the program side, but the pieces that I can speak to. So Jim, does that answer your question? Sorry.
Jim, you muted yourself. Jim, you're still muted, pal. You need to unmute. There
Yes,
you go.
know.
There
Okay,
you go.
so it would seem that your work is going to be greater than ever, given all of the COVID-19 issues financially, especially. Is there any process to actually literally bring them together, or is it the workshops that you're describing?
So yeah, great follow-up. So we are in the middle right now. We've commissioned Great Lakes Marketing Research to do a study that actually the link is going out today. And we want to gather as much information as we can from all of these different organizations to understand what their needs are, particularly post-COVID. And then we're going to go back to the whiteboard and we're going to design, it's going to be a revised service model. It has to be. And one of the things, to your point, is it possible to pivot the center and focus on some of these other areas? Now, an interesting tidbit that I'll share with you is the first phase of that research was to interview a wide variety of key stakeholders, and nonprofit leaders were among that group. And it's really a funny dynamic, because when you ask the nonprofit leaders, are there too many nonprofits? Yes. Should some nonprofits merge? Absolutely, yes. Would your group be one of them? No. We're unique and different. So there's a whole cultural piece and a change management piece that needs to go with this. I'm not naive. It's not going to be an easy, quick pivot, but I think some of it, just due to external factors, is going to happen anyway. Is Keith on the call today? Does Keith want to say something?
I look for him. I don't see him out there.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
Well, thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
Okay, Yuval has a question. Yuval, go ahead. Oh. Yuval?
Unmute.
Oh,
Okay,
there you are.
very good. Thank you. Yes, for someone like me who lived in 3 countries equally, Israel, England, and America, I'd like you to compare I'm in awe with the generosity of America in this respect, and how is it compared to, say, Western countries, say in Europe? I know how it is in Israel, and how much the taxation system, our taxation system here, helps or is responsible for that generosity.
Well, I've only lived in Canada and the US. I wish Annalisa Gretefe was on this call, because she is an expert on philanthropy around the world. But just listening to Annalise along the way, I mean, you learn things hanging out at the foundation, is that it would seem to me that it's the structure of the social network in other countries that differs and causes, so things that aren't taken care of by the government here through social programs are naturally picked up by other groups that form in addition to the government. And I mean, I feel like I'm speaking the choir because obviously you've lived there in different areas, but that's what it would seem to me, is that there's a difference in the priority of the programs funded through the governments and, you know, through taxation through the governments. The tax question, I don't know that I can really do justice to that. If there's a tax attorney on, that's great. I honestly don't know if I can do justice to that question.
Okay.
Are we generally more generous, or that the taxation allowances make us more generous, quote unquote?
I don't know if the counties or the countries and the communities are more generous, because I think you'd have to add up the tax and the donations. I mean, if you're really interested, I can dig around and see what research I can find. I'm sure that exists out there in terms of funding patterns. I just don't want to misspeak on this call.
Yeah. Great. Okay, let's go to Mark. Mark's got a question. Mark, go ahead and unmute.
Hello, I had a question relative to nonprofit startups. The Minority Business Assistance Center, we have a person who does a lot of work with nonprofits. And I know we've utilized your center before. What is the best way for someone who wants to start up a nonprofit? What kind of resources do they need to gauge? Where do they start, in your opinion?
Yeah, hi, great to see you again. Where do they start? For me, when they come to see me, I'm asking lots of questions about the research in the marketplace that they might have conducted. Most of them haven't, because I have actually a pretty good conversion track record. When I talk to people and explain to them what's really involved in committing to a nonprofit, a lot of them say, oh, I'll go volunteer in a group, or I'll talk to another group that's already doing the work. So by far, the number one lead question is, what research have you done about the need and what might already be out there? And then we talk about roles that need to be filled, because by far, most people want to be on end-line delivery, and they hadn't really thought about all the stuff in the back office that has to be done for compliance. And then funding, I wish it was a different story. Most of them who come to me are saying, I want a 501c3 so I can get my grants. And then we have, you're nodding, Mark, it sounds like it's a similar conversation. So we have to have a conversation about the realities of that. Yes, you are now eligible for grants, but just because you get a 501c3 status does not mean that the grant money is rolling in, nor is it prudent based on some of the data we looked at earlier on donor dependence. You want to have some diversified income. So we talk a little bit about their business model. If they really need business model work, we have a partnership with SCORE, and we send them over there, and they work with them on their specific business model. If they need legal assistance, we enjoy a great relationship with the Toledo Bar Association. They started a pro bono for nonprofits service, and they can help with not only startup paperwork, but a number of different issues. There's a lot of generous attorneys around town who want to give their time to the nonprofit community. What else? And then we walk them through the actual steps that are required, because sometimes they miss one or two of the steps, and then they end up in a little bit of trouble. Yeah. Great.
Kurt Church, go ahead with your question, Kurt.
Hi, Heather. Thanks very much for your presentation. It just occurred to me that as you were speaking about the number of duplicate types of organizations that may do the similar thing, after your marketing, I guess, what do I want to say? Marketing analysis that this group is doing for you, that you just are contracting with, is there going to be, would you take it the next step further and maybe make a template on how to combine these organizations, because there will be tax implications and all that type of thing?
Possibly. I gave this presentation to another group, and a guy gave me a button that said, "Data is my love language," and that really is true. of course, we're looking for best practices, we're looking for templates, we're looking for new ways forward to increase the impact. It's really difficult to say that that would be one of them until we see the data, but that's really a great idea. You know, it's also a slippery slope. How much organically comes from the nonprofit versus us trying to convene and beat the horse? I mean, sometimes it's not appropriate for us to say, hey, we want all of you in a room and do, like, you know, we have to be careful how we do that. That's why I love the data, because the data speaks for itself. So if we go back to the 35 animal abuse, prevention of abuse and neglect, let's face it, it's highly unlikely that the kill and the no-kill shelters philosophically are going to join. But that doesn't mean that they couldn't leverage purchasing power for vet services or share brick and mortar or pet supplies or whatever medicine, whatever it is they need. There's lots of things that they could do that isn't exclusively defined by merger. The big M scares people. So that's one of the things I really like about the guidelines for SAP. That's what we call it, Strategic Alliance Partnership Grant, the SAP grant, is it has a really wide definition of strategic alliance, everything from full-on merger to the creation of a new umbrella organization, shared back office, shared facilities, shared technology, shared staff, and really, really high level program combination. So I think we have to look at any and all of those things, and this just might be the set of circumstances with the external pressure that forces some of the groups to rethink how they go forward.
Thank you. I just thought a template might be interesting. I
Yeah,
mean,
it's a great idea.
For all of that type of
Yeah.
information you just shared. So, okay, thank you.
It's a great idea. Thank you.
Okay, we had a couple questions come in on the chat, and I'm going to kind of combine them because it's they kind of play off each other. The first one was from past President Tim Ryan asking if there is some kind of efficacy rating system for small nonprofits. And then from there, I kind of want to segue. I think there's one that everybody here on this call probably would be curious about your thoughts is, can you give your thoughts on Toledo Rotary's foundation?
So we've talked about a rating system. We've conceptually, we've talked about what it shouldn't do. It shouldn't duplicate what's already out on GuideStar or what's the other one, Compass, whatever the other one is. So it does, to my knowledge, and in my research, it doesn't exist. I think there's pros and cons. I think it could be a natural extension from where we are right now. So it's a possibility. I'll tell you what limited knowledge I know about the Rotary Foundation from what I hear out in the community, that you all do great work, that the people who work on the projects love the projects and the contributions they're working on. I know that some efficiencies have been gained by leveraging the systems internally inside the Greater Toledo Community Foundation. Other than that, I really don't have a working knowledge of the foundation. So I hope that's helpful.
Yeah, thank you. Let's go to one more with Dr. Durant from Toledo Public Schools.
Hi, Dr. Durant.
How are you doing? Appreciate the presentation. It was great information. Really do appreciate it because we deal with a lot of, as you can imagine, non-for-profit entities in the city of Toledo, and sitting on many of the boards myself and trying to redirect in some aspects of it. And I just wanted to get your thoughts because in education, obviously we're required by law to have a 5-year forecast. You need to be balanced within 5 years in order to certify. But I struggle when I sit on these non-for-profits with just a one-year budget. I'm thinking we're making decisions as boards that we need to see the impact reflected in year 2 and year 3, if not 5. I mean, 5 is an extreme, but I was just trying to get your thoughts in essence, because I mean, people say, well, I said we deal with whether it's enrollment, whether it's government cut, whether it's vouchers, property taxation, we're always having to respond, and we always have to account for all that in our budget. In essence, when we come into time like that we have a reserve fund that allows us to last for 6 months, even within that, because you should do that in your own personal finance. So just wanted to get your thoughts on forecast system for non-for-profit, because everyone I go on is always a 1 year.
Yeah, that is such a juicy question. I think the degree to which, well, so I'll state what I think is the obvious. It's going to be a function of how sophisticated is the board and how involved is the board, because we know in an ideal world, there's a balance that we balance the chair and your top staff person, assuming you're big enough for staff. Sometimes it can get tilted and the board isn't really, like, sometimes they're asleep at the switch and the executive director is doing the heavy lift to making the decisions. Sometimes it's the other way. This usually means they've lost confidence somewhere in the top staff person. But if you can, if the board can look out, how do I want to say this? Hang on a second. There's many, many things that can come over from business that would be good for nonprofit. I don't want to leave you with the impression that just applying everything that works in business should be applied in nonprofit. This, however, I think is one of the areas where we could collectively benefit, particularly when we are looking at, we want to switch the lens from output or outcomes to true impact, because as you know, Dr. Durant, the only way we can measure the big impact factors is over a multi-year period. So the degree to which organizations could budget over multi-year and be held accountable to those results and be nimble enough to pivot when something like a COVID comes along, I think could be a great step towards an overall healthier and higher impact nonprofit community. Does that answer your question?
I'll say yes for him because I think he muted.
Okay.
Heather, thank you very much. I'm going to turn things back over to President Alex.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us today, Heather, and for an excellent and informative presentation. Our gift to you will be, and we'll be sending it to you, is a well-known book in Toledo, Historical Tales of Toledo, authored by past President Clint Mock.
Thank you.
We'll also make a donation to the Polio Plus Fund in your name. And thanks again for joining us. Next week's presentation, next week's meeting, Corinne Gregory, where her topic will be character in a time of crisis. Today we have two committee meetings, youth services and vocational services, both beginning at 1:10. For those participants who are planning on attending these meetings, please stay on the Zoom call and you'll be placed into a breakout room. And now, the moment we've been waiting for, Chuck's Chuckles. Chuck?
First of all, tell the truth. Was that your dog that just shook a minute ago?
Yes.
Okay, that's what I thought.
It wasn't me.
No, I was hoping it wasn't you. The move from the Park Inn to the Toledo Club, I understand, has gone well. And Kathy's been on vacation, but I understand she's back now. But I also heard that there may be some staff adjustments because the staffing that we got at the Park Inn, we had some people that really we weren't paying, but they were helping us with several issues that now at the Toledo Club aren't being taken care of. So I think there's movement afoot to add staff, and here are some of the people that that are, from what I understand, are going to be needed in the new office. For instance, we're going to be moving to the new accounting firm of Dowson Burnham soon to take care of our accounting needs. And the new accounts payable administrator will be Imelda Checks. We got new office chairs, which is good. The office chairs, we hired a consultant to select the office chairs. Filling that role is Wilma Buttfit is taking care of that. The assistant director of moral support is Hugo Girl. The new caffeine addiction counselor is Bruno Moore. The credit counselor is Max Stout. The new director of purchasing is Ms. Lois Bitter. We have a divorce attorney on staff, sadly, but it's a good idea to have that. The new divorce attorney is Carmine, not yours. The new head of security is Barb Dwyer will be filling that role, and the new restroom attendants that the Toledo Club put on to help us out are Trudy Dorr and Donna Hall. So that's the end of my list, and my apologies to Click and Clack. Back to you, President Alex.
Okay, well, I can deny all of those.
Except for
And
the dog.
If I had a hook, I probably would have put it on you really early on this one. So thanks to everybody for a great meeting, and have a great week, and we're adjourned.
Breakout sessions offer the opportunity to network with members from around the world while learning new skill sets.
As Rotary, we have been static for so long, but this is an opportunity for us to vision again and look ahead.
Breakouts are a place to discover the latest ideas and strategies that drive Rotary. As you can see, convention is an excellent opportunity for development.
The new vision statement is something that I will try and introduce at Club Assembly in 2 weeks at our club, and we will definitely adopt that.
Another great place to share your ideas is the social media lounge in the House of Friendship. Stop by to participate in interactive quick chats with new friends or get personalized help for your social media channels to help tell your Rotary story.
At the Rotary International Convention in Taipei.